Welcome to the Eastern Fellows panel discussion. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Neeti Pandey. I'm an assistant professor of management in the Department of Business Administration. It has been my great pleasure to recently, last fall, join the Eastern family, and it is indeed a great honor for me to welcome our distinguished guests today. So please welcome our Eastern Fellows. On my immediate right is Kathleen Kennedy, Executive Director, Americas, Head for Recruiting Delivery at UBS Financial Services. And next to her is Kathy Gentilozzi, who is the Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Aeropostale. They're both Eastern alumni, they're Eastern graduates, so I'm sure they'll have very interesting stories for us. As someone who conducts research and who teaches in the human resource management field, it is especially my pleasure to introduce our speakers today because they have gone on to build their careers and become high-ranking executives in the field of human resource management. It is a double the pleasure to actually introduce some of our leading Society for Human Resource Management students who are just starting a student chapter here. And it really is very encouraging for them to see the success that can be achieved in the human resource management field. Quick notes on process. If you are a student in my class or in Dr. Baragoshi's class, you need to sign in with Ashley by the door. The way this is going to work is each of our panelists have been requested to prepare some remarks. The remarks are around the topics of how they view the advantages of a liberal education, such as that offered here at Eastern. We'll talk a little bit about their career paths after graduating from Eastern, the challenges and opportunities for graduates to look forward to as you prepare yourselves for the future, as well as any words of wisdom that they would like to share with the student body today. So what I'm going to do is briefly introduce Kathleen before giving the floor to her to talk to you. Their detailed biographies are actually on your seats, so feel free to peruse them. Kathleen Kennedy graduated from Eastern in 1974 with a bachelor's degree in sociology and applied social relations. She went on to graduate school and a career in counseling, as well as a career in human resources that has evolved organically over the years through her experiences in a very wide range of corporations. So,
thank you. First of all, let me share that it is such a privilege to be back here and to be honored as a fellow. When I was sitting in your seats, I couldn't have imagined that my life would turn out the way it is. It has. And much of that has to do with the folks I met at Eastern and the path that they helped me to get on. So I wanted to start a little bit by, when I think about my career, I think about early career, mid-career, and where I am now, okay, after 40 years of employment, preparing for retirement. And it's kind of a framework that I think can help guide, the conversation I'll have with you today. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and I wondered how many of you are first generation coming to college? Okay, good. And I don't know if this is true for you, but for me, back then, right, think about your parents, girls who went to college were either teachers or nurses. And I knew I didn't want nursing, so I guess I was going to be a teacher. And wound up at Eastern because it was a teacher's college and a state college, something my family could afford. And pretty much in my first semester here, realized I did a practicum in teaching. I said, this is not what I want to do. So now what? And spent the next 2 or 3 semesters trying to figure out, why am I here? And I didn't do a very good job of figuring it out because at one point, and my mother reminded me today, she's sitting in the audience, and it was her inspiration that led us to go to college, a dream she always had for herself. I came home at Thanksgiving and said, Mom, I'm quitting school. And I had this John Lennon song, Imagine, so it was back in that time. I'm going across the country, work as a waitress, and figure it out, and live my life. And she cried and said, please, can't you just stay, get your associate's degree? I was like, I don't know. And when I came back to school, I was a work-study student in the dean's office, Office of Student Affairs, and Betty Tipton was the dean, and she called me in. I need to talk to you. What's this about you wanting to quit school? Well, I took all of my required courses. I'm not connecting. I came here for teaching. I don't want to teach. I don't know why I'm here. And she said, can you just hang in there for the next semester? Instead of taking all these courses you have to take the courses you want to take, right? And so I took sculpture and ceramics, and I took badminton and square dancing, and I took a course with this faculty member I met in my first year named Jean Thorison, who was in sociology department. I didn't know what sociology was at all, but Jean was somebody who really inspired me and made my brain hurt. When I came out of her classes, she worked my brain really hard. And I said, maybe if I become a social major, I can hang in here a little bit longer. And I became a social major. And that also opened up an opportunity for me because it was called Applied Social Relations at that point in time. And you got to do a practicum. And here I am, first generation. My parents are giving me all the money that they can afford. I have student loans. I know I need a job when I get out of this place to start paying up my student loans. So this practicum will give me something to put on my resume. I worked at the Niantic State Prison for Women, and I worked with a group of lesbians. In Jean's class, there was a class called Deviant Behavior. That's what it was called at the time. And homosexuality was part of that study. And I said, I don't understand this. I don't understand what this is all about. I need to understand it better. So I ran a group with some lesbian prisoners, and I found out, gee, they don't have an issue. What's the problem here? They have lives. This is a choice that they've made, and this is what they're comfortable with. And in this group, I found out the prison guards were a problem because the prison guards were totally uncomfortable with the fact that this is part of who they were. And so I wound up running a group for the prison guards in terms of awareness and acceptance of these women and raising the concerns and trying to build some harmony between the guards and the prisoners. And the feedback that I got at the end of that season was kind of transformational in terms of who I was. Because up until then, I was a student leader, and I, got good grades, but I didn't know how that relates to a job. The feedback that I got at the end of this was, you're really good at building trust with people. You're really good at having people, at listening, and listening intently to what people are saying, and then taking action on that. And that's a role that a social worker would do. So I said, aha, that'll be what I'd be, a social worker. I said, no, I don't think so. Because I can impact these people's lives when they're in the prison, but when they go back to the homes where they lived and the environments where they came from, where they got into trouble, I don't have control over that. I said, let me think about where can I be a counselor of normal people who have adjustment problems. And I thought about it, and I said, Betty Tipton. Betty Tipton is working with kids like me, who kind of was on the borderline of quitting school, and got me back on track again. So let me think about that. And she was really a role model for me very early on in terms of what does she do, how does she do it, how did she get trained, what's her educational background that she has. And between Betty and Jean Thorison, who also was shooting for me to go to graduate school, and I'm like, what are you talking about graduate school for? Like, that's for smart people and really rich people, and I'm neither, all right? She goes, no, you're really smart, and you'll get loans. I mean, you'll get scholarships. And between the two of them, it was a bad job market, too, at the time. They said, apply to graduate school. And I did what Betty Tipton did. I applied to all the counseling psych programs in the New York area. I'm from New Jersey. And I got into every program. I got scholarships at every school. And I decided to go to Teachers College at Columbia University, which is exactly the program that Betty Tipton went to. So when I think back in terms of the impact that Eastern had on my life, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have done the things that I've done without those two individuals really believing in me. And I think the first lesson I'd like to share with you is, if you look around today at some of the faculty members here or some of the maybe supervisors you have on your internships, those people exist. and trust them and listen to them. And the feedback that you're getting that doesn't sound like you because you're rejecting it, I'm really not like that, everybody's like that, listen really hard, because those are the cues of qualities and skills and aptitude that you have to do something that is applicable in the job market later on. So I go to Columbia, I get my degree in counseling psychology. I did an internship at Barnard College, the Women's College of Columbia University. And that was very cool because I tried to arrange internships during the winter break for a bunch of students. And I thought about, if I turn this program, double the size of the program, they can't hire an intern anymore. They're gonna have to hire a full-time person to do this job. And that's what I did. I went out and marketed the heck in every dorm to try to get students to apply to the internship program. It was like 300% higher than the year before of applicants. And then I said, oh my goodness, how am I gonna find internships for all these people? And then I hustled with the Alumni Affairs group and the faculty members to say, help me find internships for these people, put the groups together, and guess what? They offered me a full-time job because they couldn't have an intern run it anymore. So, the lesson there is, when you see an opportunity that's in front of you, grab it and see what you can do with the opportunity, right? We talked a little bit in the classes this morning about, your bosses and trying to, aspire to the job that you think you want to be. You can make those things happen for yourself. Don't look at a job as, this is my job, I have to do this. Anticipate what your boss needs to get done, and anticipate what you think is good for that university or the company that you're working for, the department you're working for, and fill in those gaps. Do more than what you're expected to do, and good things happen. So I talk about that time because that was kind of my forming my vision, forming my dream. I thought I wanted to get a PhD. Now that I got a college degree, wouldn't it be cool if, I was the first doctorate in the family? Started a PhD, which I didn't finish because I was working at NYU at the time as the Dean of Career Services, and it was really my first exposure to the business world. And again, not having that from my background, I didn't know anybody in my family who worked in the business world, really. I saw what accounting firms did. I saw what consulting firms did. These Wall Street, people were coming on campus to interview our students. And they came and said, Kathy, you'd be great as an institutional salesperson. I'm like, I'm not really good at math. I think you have to be good at math. And I said, but you did pass statistics with a lot of pain, but you got through it. And I said, maybe I should get a job on the other side of academia, in the corporate world, doing MBA recruiting for a company, and transfer my skills from the academic side to the corporate side, and work on a Wall Street trading floor. And that's what I did. And when I realized I love the environment, I love the culture, I love the people, I like the frenetic, crazy pace, I like the types of people who work there. But whether stocks went up or down, I could care less, right? So being an institutional salesperson was not the right role for me, but maybe being a recruiter or being an executive headhunter or doing something, the theme that I had from the background from those years was people were my product. So I should probably find a career around people. And so that PhD degree was not necessarily realistic anymore for me because I really wanted to try this corporate life more than continue on this other route. So I took a risk and interviewed for a job at Chase Manhattan Bank for Chase Securities. And I went in for the interview for recruiting, but in the course of interviewing, they told me, how about becoming a generalist, an HR generalist? I'm like, what's an HR generalist, all right? And you're basically the HR manager for a business, and you're consulting with the business on everything they need about HR. So it could be training, it could be compensation, it could be employee relations. And I said, but I don't know anything about those things, right? All I know is recruiting. And they said, you're smart enough to learn, but more importantly, you have a personality to deal with a business manager who nobody wants to work with. All right? And I'm like, what's wrong with him? He yells and screams. And I realized my psych background has trained me to really be a good listener, right? So when people are crying, they're cathartic, they're in pain, I'm listening. So when Richard was screaming and yelling about whatever, I was listening. And I was able to use the specialists at Chase Manhattan Bank, the trainers, the comp people, the ER people, the talent people, to deliver to him. So I was more of an orchestra leader. And that was really my first HR job, which was terrific. So I was still in my environment, right, the Wall Street trading floor environment, but I was doing a job that was totally related to my skill set and my interests, which was HR, working with people, and kind of being the orchestra leader. So my middle career then was building on those skills. I went to Merrill Lynch. I had 5 jobs in 7 years there, and every time I thought I was just doing well, they'd pick me up and move me to another job, right? And the lesson there is, when those windows of opportunity open, jump and accept them. You know, I told a story in the class before about how when I moved to a new job, because I've had a lot of jobs. I worked at Merrill Lynch, at Goldman Sachs. I was head of HR for Zurich Capital Markets. I did a short stint at Virgin Mobile, which is very much like your culture. And now I'm at UBS. But when opportunities present themselves, I would always go through the interview process, accept the job, and then the week before I was supposed to start, I'd freak out. Like, what did I do? I oversold myself. I've never done this before. You know, you start second guessing whether you can. And then, you know, a person told me, but Kathy, every time you get to a new job, you figure it out and you succeed. You're more successful than you were at the last job. So the advice there is trust your instincts, gather the courage, go forward, take the risk, and use the resources within that company to leverage and support you in being successful at that next step. So I think now, where I'm at a point is I've had this rat race, I've had this move up the ladder, I've built my resume, I have this, you know, kind of track record, but now I'm approaching a time where it's time to slow down a little bit more. I have one more child, I have 3 children. My last is a junior in college, so I have 1 more year of tuition, right? But I'm also realizing I have 20 years of life ahead of me, or more, right? Or 20 years of work, an ability to make a difference and make an impact. And now I'm beginning to plan for, what do I do next? And a great opportunity has been presented to me by Bucknell University, which is where my eldest daughter went, to come back and work with them on building a program of connecting their students to Wall Street and doing a lot of career counseling and coaching and job development to begin to kind of bridge that gap. So if you think about what I've done, I've come full circle, right? I started there, and I'm going to wind up ending there. And that's kind of my story. So, good job.
Our next guest is Kathy Gentilozzi. She's an Eastern graduate from 1981 with a Bachelor's of Science in Educational Studies. She has had a long career in human resources with the May Company before her current job with Aeropostale in Manhattan. I would now like to invite her to present her remarks.
Thank you very much. Well, the interesting thing that Kathy and I have found, in addition to our same name, is that even though we're in 2 completely different industries, we have a lot of the same advice that we gave to the class this morning, and some of you in the room again, so I'm going to see how am I going to try to mix this up. But let me tell you a little bit about my story. When I graduated in '81, I'm the oldest of 8 children. My parents said that they would put us through college, but it was pretty much going to be a state school kind of thing, which was great. So I applied to Eastern because I wanted to be a teacher, because my mom was a teacher. I've been around kids my whole life, been changing diapers since I was 5. It was a natural, right? So I came here, got a great education, graduated in '81. There was one slight snag. There weren't really many teacher jobs around. So I had never worked in retail in high school or college, which most young women and guys do. So I thought, okay, while I'm substitute teaching, hoping for this opening to occur, I will work part-time at the Limited, right? Makes sense, why not? You know, I gotta have a couple bucks, right? Going out money as I'm living back at home, much to my parents' chagrin. So I worked there for a little bit, and within 6 months, I was approached, do you want to be an assistant manager? Now, I've been out of college for 6 months. I think I'm going down this path. Already I have one of these, options. So I go home. I was very excited. As I said, I loved the connection, like Kathy said, the connection with people. I liked selling. So I go home and I tell my parents, I'm all pumped up. I'm like, this is great. I'm going to be going to management. I'm going to work at the Limited. And my father says, you're going to sell shirts? really? After I just paid for 4 years of school? I said, yeah, but it's going to be great. Fast forward, I worked for them for 3 years. I moved, I got promoted very, very quickly. I became a store manager within a year. I lived in Connecticut, so I moved a lot. As I was telling the story earlier, one year I actually moved 3 times. I was in 3 different states. My brother-in-law did my taxes, and he's like, for God's sakes, can you just stay put for a minute? This is taking more work to do your measly tax return than everybody else's. So I worked for them for 3 years, and then May Company at the time recruited me to work for them. This is so I'm going to digress for a minute, but it'll make a point. At that point, I was in Massachusetts. My husband and I actually met here at Eastern. We met our freshman year in Crandall Hall. Any Crandall people here? Yay. So I actually started in September. He came in January. Unfortunately, over break, I had to have surgery on my knee, cheerleading incident, but we won't go into that. So I was on crutches. And so he met me, passing in the hallway because he was on 3 and I was on 2. And he said, can I walk you down to the hospital because I had to go to physical therapy. Now, he tells a story. He tried to date me because I couldn't run away. But 3 children later, married 28 years, you got to get the story, okay? So at any rate, so when I was going to work for the May Company, I said, I will come and join you, but I want to move back to Connecticut because that's where my now husband was. So I moved back there, worked on the selling floor for a long time. I was a department manager. I then went into the buying office when my first child was born because I thought you work a lot of hours in the stores, a lot of nights, weekends, that kind of thing, which I loved. But then I went into the buying office and was actually an assistant buyer in children's because I was the only one with an infant. I was the only one with a child. So I was in like little girls, like toddlers. They would throw stuff over the wall going, would you put Christina in this? I go, no, too scratchy. They go, okay, no, that's not gonna work. So I was a buyer for a while. I liked it, but didn't like it because I was in a cube. And I like to be out and about. You guys can figure this out. So then I went home to have my second child, and then while I was home on maternity leave, they said, you know what, you've been a merchant, but we have a training job open to train merchants. Would you ever consider that? Because your degree's in education, right? I'm like, sure. So I was telling the students this morning, so I actually brought my son on the interview because he was only 2 weeks old, I couldn't leave him. So he came with me. I'm like, hello, we're here. I was very progressive back in the day. So I got the job, and then that's how I got into HR. So I did some training, and then I was thrown into another job that didn't exist, which that's, speaking of life lessons, our CEO at the time had come from Macy's, and he said, I want a specialized selling program. I want you to take, like everyone who sells cosmetics, women's shoes, men's clothing, I want you to work on all these folks to give them more incentive, more education. And I'm like, I have no idea what that job is. He goes, oh, well, you can figure it out. I'm in a made-up job. I'm like, okay. So I made it up and moved on. And then when our companies merged, that's when I ended up going to Boston, again to another made-up job. They're like, we want you to head up the store's HR. So we have a lot of people, 400 people or so in each store, and there's HR managers in each store. We want you to run that. I go, I've never even been an HR manager. Goes back to what Kathy said. They had confidence in me. Sure, I can do it. And I was in that role for many, many years. So I went into different roles. I was in organizational development. The only job I haven't had is benefits and comp. So then when Macy's purchased us, I had then gone out to corporate in St. Louis for May Company, moved my family, which was difficult. They were little at the time, and they were in like grammar school, middle school. Not fun, but my husband is a trooper, so off we went. So I worked there in St. Louis between May Company and Macy's for about 9 years. So now my oldest was in college. My other 2 were about to go into college. And the division I was in with Macy's, even though it just started 2 years prior, and I did all this recruitment and brought people from all over the country. I reload them. I basically filled 400 spots. 2 years later, I had to unwind that all. So I was so preoccupied with moving and getting everyone situated into new roles that and I'm the primary breadwinner, my husband would call me, when are you gonna look for a job? I go, but I gotta place these guys. He goes, you have 400 people, what about you? So at any rate, so the HR people always get displaced last because they need us to do the work, which is fine. So at one point I got a phone call, this is a very funny story, and I already knew I wasn't going forward. It's one of those phone calls you get, and it happened to be on April 14th, and the reason why I remember that is my birthday. And they said, we're not gonna have a position for you. You know, you're downsizing divisions. I was the last woman in, so I understood it. The next day, I got a phone call, and I was chatting with this person, and they said, I said, yeah, I'm open, would you relocate? I might. Would you ever come back to the East Coast? And I said, I might, and what's the job? And they said, well, any chance you could get on a plane like tomorrow? And I'm like, sure, to go where? To New York. Well, what I didn't know is they had a candidate they were ready to offer the job to. That's why I had to chop, get on this plane. There I was on the plane, 6 a.m., flew in, I went through, this is a very funny story, I went through 12 interviews. You know how we normally bring people back? They didn't have time. Well, there was no HR person in the role, obviously, because that's what they were talking to me about. I have to eat, and I went through the entire day with no food. Now, that's HR 101. You got to feed the candidate, especially since they've been up since 4. So they're feeding me water, and I'm in the restroom every 2 minutes. So I'm, whatever. So I go through all my interviews, get on the plane. Now I'm going back to Missouri. And the headhunters call me, going, they loved you. What do you think? I go, this was like speed dating. I met each person for like 20 minutes. Long story short, I asked to go back. I got offered the job. I moved to New York. My family moved. My daughter, youngest daughter, was a senior in high school. So she and my husband stayed in Missouri for that year, and I commuted back every 3 weeks. My daughter was at Villanova, so she's in Pennsylvania. My son was kind of half in Missouri, half with me. At one point, we had a holiday. We were in 5 different states because there's 5 of us. So I'm like, okay, we got to wind this down. So we all got together in 2009. My position is awesome. I was telling everyone this morning. How many of you are familiar with Aeropostale in the mall? Yeah, okay. It's a very young company. It's a fun company. Our employees, we have about 25,000 employees. 30,000 during back to school and holiday time. Most of our, 80% of our folks are high school and college students, so they're very young, which is great, but they're very young, which keeps me busy, because in many cases this is their first job. And so that's kind of cool. In corporate, it's also a young company. Our average age, I would say, is late 20s, early 30s. So me being my 50s, I'm old, but that's okay. I was telling the story this morning that we do a recognition event in Florida once a year for our top 100 performing store managers. And so I walked into that, my first one in 2009, and we have all this, music playing and all the stuff that my children listen to and now I listen to again, and I see all the senior leaders dancing on chairs. I'm like, oh, I can do this. So there I am, dancing like my kids would be horrified, but that's another story. So it's a great opportunity. It is as you heard, I have all of HR. So I have recruitment, I have benefits, I have learning and development, I have compensation. So anything that touches our employees, I am responsible for. In between all these meetings, I'm texting people back, yep, do this, don't do that, go ahead. But it is very rewarding work, and those of you that are contemplating getting into this field, even though I kind of stumbled into it, I think it's one of the best you can possibly hope for. Side note to that is where that's my passion. I, like Kathy, love connecting with people, chatting with people. I get very energized by that. When I go out to the stores, I was in LA last week visiting some of our stores. I love talking to we call them role models, because we're hoping that our young people are role models to customers and their fellow employees. I get so energized by speaking with them and learning what they like to do outside of working for Aeropostale. And I get very excited about that. But I think backing up to my first moment when I realized I wasn't getting a teaching job is I was kind of like, uh-oh, now what? But I think it sounds very cliche, but when one door closes, another door opens. And I think, as Kathy said, you have to go with your gut. Okay, what do you really like? Well, I like the teaching aspect because I like connecting one-on-one with people. And then when I went into just working in the stores, I liked managing a team. Like Kathy said, she was the orchestra leader. And that's how I feel my role is. There's some days where I am dealing with, some days I text my boss going, really, this is what you pay me for? We had a big meeting last week, and I had to figure out whether or not we were serving snacks at break. Okay, that's a big role. What are we having for lunch? How am I gonna move 600 people out of one room to breakout rooms? Or I'm sitting with my CEO trying to determine what our organizational structure is gonna look like for the next 3 years. We have a couple growth vehicles. We have PS by Aeropostale, which is our children's brand, where we have 100 stores. We have 1,000 Aeropostale stores. So that's a growth vehicle. We're going more and more internationally. So do we have the right structure? Our e-com business is through the roof. We don't have enough people. I mean, physically our teams are very small. And I don't know if you know this, we design and manufacture and produce everything that we sell in our stores. We do not buy any of that. So we have designers, production people, it runs the gamut, but are we structured correctly for that? So it goes from a small thing, which what I like, to a very strategic and long-term piece. And I think that's the exciting part, because you get to use your brain. And I think going back to the relativity of Eastern is, and we had such a wonderful day today, and as Kathy said, it's been an honor to be here, but you use your brain in so many different ways, and you ebb and flow, and it's just maybe all your classes aren't going to line up what you do for a living ultimately, but boy, does it all come into play. So I think the couple words of advice that I would give you all, and I kind of gave this advice this morning, is can I see a show of hands how many seniors we have in the room? Okay, so you all are getting ready to go out into the job market, and some of you, I can see you from class this morning. I'm going to repeat some of this stuff. But I have an opportunity to interview, whether it be an entry-level person up to vice presidents, senior vice presidents. In some cases, I'm hiring, an executive vice president who's above me. But the thing that I always come back to is make sure when you go on all these interviews, or those of you that are juniors that are going to go for an internship, do your homework on the companies that you're going to be speaking to, because that's a sign of respect, quite candidly. And you should be able to ask them questions about their business. And don't be caught off guard by that. I shared this morning a story of we had a vice president coming in for a visual position, our head of visual for all 1,000 stores. Really cool job, by the way. And I talked to him. I was lukewarm, but I just had a half an hour with him, so I didn't know if I had enough time. He went on to meet with a couple other people, and what we realized pretty quickly is he knew nothing about our company. He didn't know we had a children's brand. He didn't know we were international. All you have to do is go online. I mean, you guys are smarter than that, right? So do your homework, make sure you're prepared, and that also segues into make sure you have a couple questions prepared for the interviewer. It doesn't matter if you ask the same question to every interviewer. I would give you the advice, I'm sorry, I sound like I'm talking to my kids. Make sure that you really good questions, and you can say, I've asked this to other people, but I would like your take on the question. They're gonna think you're brilliant, right? The other thing I would suggest you do is anyone that you interview with, make sure that you send them a follow-up thank you. Even if you thought the thing was a disaster, send them a follow-up thank you, whether it be an email, but I'm still old-fashioned in if you really want the job, send a handwritten note. It makes a big difference, because there are a lot of you out there looking for these roles, whether it be an internship or a full-time position. That will differentiate yourself, for sure. And if they don't give you your business card, their business card, ask for it, because you don't want to stumble of, how did Kathy spell her name? And Gentilozzi's really long. I have no idea how many Z's. Just get their business card. Or if they have an assistant, call them, because they're very helpful. So let me think what else. The other thing I would say is trust not only your instincts and your gut, but also trust others. Kathy kind of mentioned this. I had a gentleman that I worked for in my May company career three different times. He was my boss on 3 different occasions. He would go one part of the country, I would follow him back here, and he's helped me tremendously, not only when he was my boss, but also in 2008 when I didn't have a job. He helped me and required me to do a lot more networking than I had ever done before. I was not that good at it. You were much better, based on your story. But because I worked for a very large company and had a lot of divisions, I thought, well, I can just move from division to division. And I wasn't as mindful about being as networked outside of my little core group. So I would suggest you do that. And the last thing I'm going to suggest is that you utilize contacts. And it doesn't matter if it's a friend of your parents or a friend of someone you met, or Kathy or I. I'll share this one really quick story, a personal story. My oldest daughter, Christina, she graduated in 2009, as I mentioned. She went to work for Delia's. She ended up being in retail too, why not? And then she really, more than life itself, wanted to work for J. Crew. She is the poster child. She has every outfit known to mankind. She's constantly texting me, did you see the new top? I'm like, okay. So she wanted to work for them desperately, and she's a merchant. She wanted to work in their buying office. So I knew a colleague of mine had a friend that's a senior level person at J. Crew. So I said, would you ever be comfortable in passing on Christina's resume to your friend, who I had never met, by the way? And he figured, okay, he knew me, and figured, okay, if she was half the person decent like I was, give it a shot. So he forwarded the resume. I'm sure that's why this gentleman picked up the phone and called Christina for an interview. She did the rest. Long story, she's been there 2 years. She's gotten promoted from assistant to associate. She's a merchant, and she basically determines what part of the Crew Cuts kid line is. So when you go into the stores, my daughter does the sweaters and the knits for that area. And she's 25, and she's on her way. And she's a little studio apartment in Manhattan, and she's doing her own thing. So it's the method that really what I'm sharing, that personal story is, I didn't get her the job. But because I knew someone who knew someone, the resumes just get passed, and basically they'll go to the top of the pile. And you may get a call for consideration because of a connection. There's nothing wrong with that. In this very competitive marketplace, I would take advantage of it, just like I did with my former boss. And obviously, I've been around the block a few times, hence I graduated in '81, but okay, we had to go there. So that's kind of my story, as Kathy shared. So at this point, if it's okay with everyone else, am I skipping ahead? Can I go? I'm sorry. You could tell that we're used to doing our own thing. If any of you have any questions, Kathy and I would be happy to answer any and all, or thought, or question, or comment.
And I'd just say that when you're asking a question, please briefly introduce yourself before you ask the question.
Remember what I said, the 2 questions. Hi, Maura.
I was wondering, both of you move around a lot for different jobs, and you said like they weren't real jobs before you had them. So how did you get those jobs? Did they make them for you, or did you like ask?
Why don't you go first?
Yeah. So sometimes life events make you change. You know, a couple times I moved, so my commute to Hofstra Law School wasn't going to work anymore. And I'd say, whenever I'm ready to move or feel a little bored or have tried to leverage inside my company to find another job, I always use my network. You start getting the word out to your colleagues and your friends and all that. I think I found one job through the New York Times. My Hofstra Law School job I found through the New York Times. My NYU job, I picked up the phone and said, you know, we're moving to New Jersey. I can't go from Brooklyn to Long Island anymore. It was my friend who ran placement at the law school of NYU. They said, oh, you know, I know that we're looking for somebody at NYU's business school. Next day I had an interview, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, you know, it's that network is so important. As you get further along in your career, there are people called headhunters, right? And headhunters will hawk you all the time to you know, see if you're interested in a job. And most of my friends would never answer the call. What I realized is I want to hear what opportunities are out in that marketplace. I want to hear how much they're paying and how much I'm getting paid today. And if I'm not the right person or not interested, I'm going to give them a name of somebody else, because then that way they'll call me back again. And I got this reputation for being a great sourcer, right? If Kathy's not interested, she'll give you a list of 3 or 4 people who you can call. Right, and you want that's the value of making sure that you are being nice to people and that you're being respectful, and it comes back to you. It comes back in different ways. You know, at companies, you know, Kathy's career is a great career of internal mobility, right? Of having someone again recognize a talent in you that you didn't know existed, right? So I was at Merrill Lynch. I told you I had 5 jobs in 7 years. Someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, we want you to do this. I said, I can't do that. I know nothing about it. No, you can. Go over here, all right? And I was going through a divorce. I was in my job. I was loving my job. They said, we want you to do this. I said, I can't do that. I'm going through a divorce. I'm not going to be able to start something new. Don't worry, we'll support you. And, you know, when you have mentors within your firms, that's when you really, or mentors or sponsors, and I think they're a little bit different, they help you discover those new jobs as well. But, you know, you need to be part of your professional organizations. You need to be part of some external groups, because you can get very myopic by just working inside your own company and insular. And you don't recognize your own marketability or market value by not staying connected to the outside. So that's something that I've always tried to, remember and be mindful of.
And I think with regard to the made-up jobs, because I'll talk about that since, I think that, and I spoke to the students a little bit about this morning, those roles weren't made for me. There was a company need. It was part of their strategy. But what, as I mentioned to the students this morning, what you want to be able to do, so let's say there were 3 of us, that were in the same role. You want to differentiate yourself in your role. So when a new opportunity is out there, and it's, again, designed for the company, don't get me wrong, is that they go, oh, I bet Kathy could do that. And that's in the 2 times that I was put in a brand new job, is the job existed not because they were trying to be nice to me, the job existed. Then they looked to the left and the right and said, who would be the best person for this? And they said, would you take on this role? And as Kathy said, scary as all get out, especially when it's a brand new job that no one's ever done. I mean, that's a blessing and a curse. One, you could look like a rock star because there's no one that was before you. But on the other hand, you don't know what their expectations are. I mean, you kind of do, but so you just want to exceed, and that's really another key message I would give to you is when you are in a role and when you secure this new job, even if it's so, entry level, you're a coordinator, you're an assistant, I don't care what it is your job functions are, do them and excel like crazy. That is how you're going to move forward. That is it. People want to see someone who takes the initiative, who's there not only on time, but I'll come in early, I'll take that on. As Kathy mentioned earlier, whoever your boss is, when you see them say, I can do that for you, 1, you're going to learn new things, and 2, they're going to go, thank God I have more in my group. And that's really how this works. It's not time and job. It's not just face time, so don't confuse that, because especially, it's more and more people want a positive work-life balance, but what do you do when you're at work? And how do you perform? I will tell you this. I walk around the halls, there's this one group, and everyone's up on computers, especially, between designers, merchandisers. I mean, think about we're in marketing, we're in e-com, so everyone's supposed to be on the computer. You don't think I'm walking around looking at what they're on? I know who's shopping and who isn't. I don't have to ask IT to run me a report. But I make a note of that, and my CEO does the same thing. He walks around everywhere. And we're going through a process right now that we do twice a year called talent assessment. And this isn't how did you score on your review. This is what leadership characteristics and performance we see in every individual all the way down. And I literally will sit there, I'll get an org chart, and I'll say my counterparts, I want you to star who your rock stars are and who are the ones that aren't adding value. The rock stars move up, the people aren't adding value and are taking up a seat. No company can afford that, profit or nonprofit. So I think the made-up jobs may come. You just want to be on everyone's mind before the job even occurs. Is that good? Okay. What other questions?
My name is Steve Myers, I'm a labor relations and human resources manager major. In the presentation that you gave at 11 o'clock this morning, you mentioned that there is a difference between a hopper, a job hopper, and somebody who's gets bored or thinks that they're not being encouraged enough. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on the difference between the two.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Kim. What Kim's referring to is this morning I mentioned, whereas my tenure at May Company was very long, it's almost 25 years, altogether, that's very unusual today. And now as we see resumes come in, and this is my team, I pretty much, for the most part, unless it's my own team, HR, I basically interview senior directors, vice presidents, and up. But my team, I'll see some resumes coming off the copier, and it looks like, oh my God, this person, has been in 2 years here, 2 years here, 2 years here. The difference is, you can't dismiss that, because from back in the day, that was not a good thing, because it looked like as soon as they got bored or as soon as they weren't moving up, they're going to move on. You can do that, but the thing, I think, what I want to elaborate on is in some cases, we may find that, it depends on what discipline you're in. I will tell you specifically in my field, designers move very frequently, because usually they are designing for a certain type of thing, whether a graphic designer or what have you, and sometimes their skill set, they get bored and they get rusty, so they move on. But if you're in a sales support role like I am, you shouldn't be moving every 2 years. And I think the thing that we as leaders in a company have to be mindful of is once we make a hire, and that's a big expense on everyone we hire, are we as managers nurturing and developing them in their role? We do find sometimes, and Kim, this may be where you're going, is sometimes we have people miscast. So sometimes we have to do a better job so they don't leave, because if they're not doing well, why is it? Is it them that they're not putting the effort in, or are they in the wrong role? We in our company have tried to determine that. I just mentioned this talent assessment meeting. That's where we also try to get at that. This person isn't performing. Would they be better served from design over to production? So sometimes we will move people cross-functionally. We have a perfect story like that. We had a young lady who was in merchandising. She was okay. She was okay. She was a meets expectations, I like to call it. She's, middle, C. But she was a really nice girl. She was a great girl. She had a lot of tenure when I got there. And I would listen to the manager and say, what is she really good at? She's good at deadlines. She follows up. She's very detailed. And I said, well, what if we move her over into production? Moved her over to production. The girl's a rock star. So sometimes we look, if you guys, you should be mindful of this. You can move. If you're not happy, you should move. But before you move on to another company, you should probably talk to someone, first and foremost your boss, but if that's like not a good path, then go to your HR professional, your HR generalist, and talk to them about your career, because it could be not a good fit thing, or it could be that you're in the wrong role. So my guess is you guys will work for probably about 6 companies plus in your career, where I've worked for 3, and I've been at this a long time, but just be mindful of that. Does that help, Kim, a little bit?
I just want to say, I was featured in an article in Glamour magazine a while back.
Oh, another thing I didn't know
as a
about
job
you.
hopper.
Oh.
And I'd say very early on in my career, I had a lot of jobs that were 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years. And then my Merrill Lynch job, I was at NYU. I was 7 years at Merrill Lynch, at NYU, 7 years at Merrill Lynch, and I'm 7 years at UBS. But I have a lot of different jobs in between. And the challenge is that back in those days, people stayed at Chase Manhattan Bank for a lifetime, right? People didn't move. Now we're seeing more and more, especially young people, who are looking at moving very quickly from job to job, 18 months or a year. Your expectations of us as employers are very different than, generations ago, right? Who were happy to be in the job and happy to have their job and happy to kind of be in that job until somebody said, do something else, right? You're about, or what I hear about you guys, and I'm experiencing, is you're about how can I acquire this skill, this skill, this skill, this skill, because you've seen your parents get fired from jobs. You've seen companies close down. You've seen mergers take place. So that looking at a job as a place that's secure for a lifetime isn't in your repertoire. So, but the challenge that we see, so our recruiters are really good about listening to the story. Well, why did you move? Well, I moved from Brooklyn to New Jersey, so I had to leave that job, right? Or whatever the stories are. I had moved at Merrill Lynch to a job in New Jersey, and I couldn't get back to a job at Merrill Lynch, in New York City. So I had to go to Goldman Sachs. So, things like that, you need to hear the story. But you still have managers who are the hiring managers who don't understand, why does that person, I was looking to hire an admin for the regional head of the Americas, who spent his entire career at Merrill Lynch, and his entire team spent their entire careers at Merrill Lynch. And now we're looking at some, admins who have 3 or 4 or 5 experiences in the last 10 years. And they didn't understand, where's the loyalty? Because of their own experiences. So you need to be prepared to go in with having a story and a rationale why you've moved from place to place.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, how you doing? I'm Richard Bentley, and I'm a business major in administration junior. And my question is both you being a human resource lead experts, someone who has from the older generation speaking here, so my experience is going to be a little bit different. But that's a little bit of experience. However, after many years in one particular field, crossing over and taking some of that experience, organizational experience, leadership qualities, and if you wanted to cross over and go into another field, but use those, what suggestions do you have for
you have a lot of transferable skills, right? You've developed them. The best thing you can do is really begin to translate what does that mean, and how do I demonstrate what does that mean, and what are those jobs in human resources that are the right jobs for those skill sets, right? So that you do your homework on looking to see where are the best jobs where, 90% of those skills are functioning here. Let's say you were an accountant or in financial, in a finance job. A role in compensation, people would die to have your kind of background for a role in compensation. Maybe not so much in employment, employee relations, right? So you need to kind of look to see where within the specializations of HR do you best fit. And then I'd say it's networking, 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 right? And you're going to have to make that sell. You're going to have to translate that background. You're going to have to show the applicability of the work that you've done to this new opportunity.
And I think too, even as going back to in as elementary as your resume, I would say put whatever, as Kathy said, those transferable skills, and I would, how usually people put what they're skilled in at the top, I would do that, because if they're looking quickly and you don't have a connection and it comes across somebody's desk, they're gonna go, I don't get why he's applying for this job, even though they'll get to the bottom to see that, you said you're a business major, is that correct? They'll get to that, but you wanna get them at the top. So I would put the attributes that you think you have that are transferable into this role you are seeking and put that at the top before you get into all of that. And I totally agree with Kathy. I think it's going to be networking, and I think talking about your story, if you move a lot, I think your story is going to be very different. Your story is going to be here's your background, great, but why did you make the change? Why was that so important to you? And what do you think in your life experiences you would bring to this particular role that you're interviewing for? Yep, you're welcome. Good luck.
We were asked to speak a little bit about the value of a liberal arts background, and I feel really that having come to Eastern when it was a teacher's college and having this mindset that I have to get a job, my education was a very practical education. And it wasn't until I started working at Barnard College that I realized, wow, these students are learning completely different things than I learned. Except for Jean Thoresen, who was a stickler about how I wrote. And I'd write this paper, and she loved the paper, but she'd maybe rewrite it 2 or 3 times to conform to this standard that she had at Mount Holyoke, right, a liberal arts school. And I can't thank her enough today, because when I worked at Goldman Sachs and we had to write an email, my boss would say, okay, I like it, send it to these 3 people and have them review it. I'm like, okay. Then they'd review it. She said, send it to these 3 people, 3 additional people. All right, send it. And Goldman Sachs was a very consensus-driven culture. But when I saw the product of that email, which I didn't think it was that important, my grammar wasn't that bad, the email approached the topic that we wanted to announce in a completely different way that satisfied all of those audiences. And I saw the value of getting different points of view into the item that you were trying to deliver, right? So, that has to do with communication, writing skills. I'm very freaked out that my daughter does not know how to use a phone anymore, okay? She texts everything, and worry about, as she gets a job, how is she going to function? Because we still use the phone. Although my boss last week had this etiquette of email discussion with us and said, think always before you type an email whether it's better to go talk to the person, right? So we are moving in a direction where communication or face-to-face communication is taking a whole different turn. Now there's video conferencing, there's telepresence, there's other ways that we're still relating that way, but communication either through the written word or through verbal, or if you have opportunities to really get your PowerPoint skills, if you think about going into corporate America, PowerPoint is critically important. It is the way we communicate, and I work with people who think in PowerPoint. I have no idea how to do that, but so I hire people to work with me who can do that. But the way you communicate is really important. The other thing is critical thinking, okay? And somewhere this came up, and I think Jean taught us this too. It is very dangerous to accept everything you hear, okay? And it really, at one point in my life, I took the task of reading every newspaper I could. The Wall Street Journal, when I first started reading, I didn't understand a word it said. The New York Times, the Post, the Daily News, the international paper, I'm blanking it out right now, but I think the Financial Times, which is out of London. And you read the same topic of conversation, the same issue that's happening in the world, and you hear it from different ways, okay? Same thing with watching the news on television. You know, watch the different channels. Fox News is going to present something in a very different way than NBC, ABC, and the local channels, right? And it's up to you to really discern all of those points of view and come up with your own opinion. And it's really dangerous to just accept your comfort zone and listen to the same type of opinion, because in the workforce, you're going to work with people from all different types of backgrounds, all different types of orientations, and to be able to get along and respect one another and really leverage your abilities to creativity, actually, to work together is really important. And the broader you think, the more effective you'll be.
And I think just to tie to that, I think many of you, I'm sure, do a lot of group projects today. And I'm sure, because I hear this from my kids, that there's always a weak link, it seems like, in one of these, right? I'm doing the work, this one's not participating, but, and my daughter said, I can't wait to graduate because then I won't have to deal with that. I'm like, oh, honey, there you go. This is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. So I think in addition to written word, which I'll come back to that in a second, I think collaboration, working on teams, getting organized, and again, this could be an opportunity for you to elevate yourself against your peers of who's volunteering to be the team leader. Who's going to be the scribe? Who's going to do the notes? You're right. You're right. It's a burden. The other two are slacking off. End of the day, it doesn't matter. You're pulling the team together, and people will notice that. And as Kathy was alluding to, I think the best opportunity would be to have a bunch of people around a table, and you're discussing whatever, how we're going to do the marketing for this water bottle. But by getting all these different thoughts together, and that's the thing, all that's great. But how are you then going to put this into action? I've been in numerous meetings, Kathy's smiling, she's been there too, where everyone's got this brainstorming. And I'm like, even if it's not my meeting, next steps, chop, chop, who's writing this down, who's doing what? That's the part that you can separate yourself from. So I think the coming together and dialoguing these things is very important. You do it all the time now in your classes, but then who's going to take the next step? And I totally agree with Kathy on you can get, and you will find this in any job you go into, you can get into what I call email mania. The trail is so long you forget what the original question was. And I find that it's the person next door in the next cube that you're having this conversation with. And then I'll get CC'd at the end, and I go down, especially if I'm riding the train home and I'm looking at my phone and I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, I go, what? Stop the madness. Just get up. So I'll type them back, get up and go talk to this person. It's great, it's efficient, you can work 24/7, all that's great, but ultimately the best conversations are face-to-face. And sometimes in Kathy's role, she has offices everywhere, they're in different time zones, there's a place for that, but you'll really get through the face-to-face stuff, in my opinion, you can never replace. So communication, written, and the last thing I'm going to mention about written, which comes up a lot in my organization, is I'm constantly telling my team that when we go to send something out, as Kathy said, you have to understand your audience. I'll give you a great example. When we send something out to our role models, again, these are teenagers that work 8 hours a week. You got the idea. They're in sports, they got school, they're in plays, all the stuff we love. They have a limited attention span, right? They're barely in there. The way we communicate to those folks is very different than we do our corporate team. The store guys just want to know, tell me what to do. Am I supposed to be in? We're doing inventory from 12 to 2. What time do you want me here? Done. The corporate folks need to know more of the why. We're changing this, and this is why. So I'm constantly telling my people to look at it through the lens of the person who's reading it. And I get challenged back by my team going, but this is correct. I said, it's correct. They're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. I said, you have to put it in their language. So that's, I think, a key thing, and is to drive it all back down to a liberal arts education. Even though I didn't get to do what I thought I was going to do, I wouldn't trade my experience here for anything. Not anything. And it's just like between college and your first job and your second job and your third job, you will put things in your toolkit as you go. You will have some fabulous experiences, so you're going to take those and say, boy, when I become a manager, I'm going to do this. You're going to take some other experiences that aren't going to be so pleasant. And you're going to work for people that you're going to go, good God, that was a nightmare. That also goes in your toolkit, because you know I'm never going to behave in that way. whether it be Richard the Screamer or another guy that I had that I swear was just out to make me quit. But I'm much tougher than that. So you put that in your toolkit and you move on from there. So I think, I don't want to speak for Kathy because she's already said it, but I think our experience here has been fabulous. And the one thing that I want to end this little section with is, I think you might have said this morning, Kath, that you find that you're going to be up against people from very prestigious schools and big names. And I will tell you, when I graduated, I was shaking in my shoes. I'm like, okay, this person went to, you know, all the Ivy League schools, Yale, Harvard, this, that, and then there's me from Eastern. Okay. But you know what? Many of them not only ended up being my peers, they worked for me. So you are in charge of your own destiny there. You've gotten a fabulous education here. And trust me, if the school looked like this back in the day, I'd still be here. No, I'm just kidding. But you should be
coming back,
yeah,
actually.
you should feel very honored. This is a great, great school. The faculty is fabulous. We got to have lunch with them, with the president. You're very blessed, and you know your parents did a good job sending you here. So, Kathy, have anything else you want to add?
No. Questions, more questions?
Hi, I'm Rachel Yoga. I'm a junior and I'm a psychology major. I'm studying pretty law too. I just have a question for you guys. You kind of mentioned this a little while ago. How would you recommend for undergraduates to do something like networking? I know you said that it's the most important. It's just really difficult being here. You know, you don't have access to people in the business world. It's great to talk to you guys because two people is like the first thing I got to go to. So how would you recommend that for us to get out there and, you know, get our names known?
Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, I am.
Good girl. All right. That's a great opportunity for you to begin that. And the thing is, you should, again, going back to the connections, don't be shy about linking in with, you know, friends of your parents or things like that. Doesn't matter. I mean, it's good that you're doing your peers, but I mean this with all due respect, you're all in the same boat. So I would use that as much as possible. And then hopefully you can send notes on that too, which I'm sure you know. Don't be afraid to do that. As long as you do it in a professional way, and especially if you have a connection to a connection to a connection, you use that as well. If you have other opportunities like this, just come and do that. I would also say if you have opportunities to meet folks and do mock interviews, or do those too, because that will also help you when you get the moment, that you're not doing this cold. And I'm sure you probably do in classes and whatnot, but I would strongly suggest that as well.
In the Career Services Office, I'm not sure if they have that now, or no one's calling me, but at one point asked if I would give my profile and offer myself up to phone calls from students, right? So there's an alumni directory of people who have volunteered to talk to students about their careers. I think I got one call from an Eastern student. Now maybe that's because I'm in New York, it's not that easy to, you know, get to visit me, but I'd really go back to the Career Services Office and say, where are our alumni? You know, which alumni work in, you know, we're psych and pre-law majors, and put some pressure on them to generate some names for you, right? Because I think that, you know, more than, you know, not, we've been in the same seat, right? There was somebody who helped us along the way, right, and we're willing to kind of give that back. You know, also the location of Eastern, I don't know if there are local HR or professional organizations, but they tend to have student memberships, right? Or you can go online and begin to network that way. LinkedIn is really important, and one of the things, you know, we talked about in the other class is how you're presenting yourself on LinkedIn. My recruiters are all on LinkedIn, and we make sure that they are branded correctly, that they have the right words in there, so that when somebody does a key search on the words, their profiles appear. So make sure that your LinkedIn profile looks like a resume and sounds like a resume and presents you in the best manner, all right? Also with Facebook, make sure your screens are up, because we look at that, all right? And, you know, my company doesn't want us to look at that, but somehow it happens, right? Yeah. So make sure that how you're representing is the way you want to be represented by an employer.
Yeah, especially on LinkedIn, to go back to that, your photo should not be of you at a Saturday night party with a cocktail in your hand. It shows you're a fun person, but I don't know if you're the first person I'm going to call. I mean, it should be how you want to be perceived. We talked about dress code this morning and all of that, and I'm a firm believer of you should be presenting yourself not only in the job you want, but the job above that, because that's basically what we're going to look at. Because again, there's so many that you have to have something that's going to say, wow, look at the words, look at this girl, she's pulled together, he's pulled together, and then that, you have to distinguish yourself in some way, shape, or form, because there are just, I mean, it's a fact of life, there are so many talented people out there.
And it sounds like we're talking about a lot of subjective stuff. Like, it's okay that you don't know what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Totally.
Like, we're really fine with that.
Did
you know?
we?
The important thing is that you know about yourselves,
Right.
right? Like, what motivates you, why have you made the decisions that you've made, why did you decide to come to Eastern, what did you get out of Eastern? You know, those are questions that are more important to us than what you think you want to do with life.
Yeah,
because
totally.
we know
Totally agree with
you're
that.
at that early stage,
Yeah.
and your opportunity to discover has been very limited. So that's okay. So differentiating yourself in these other ways that Kathy's been talking about is what makes the difference, right? Besides finding somebody who really has that energy, that initiative, that drive, these are the things that are important to us.
Yep, totally. You're welcome. Anybody else? Oh, she has one, okay.
Hi, I'm Jessica Sinclair. I'm a junior at Eastern. I'm studying interrelations and business management. And I know you touched base on different tasks that you did in your job, but what is it in particular?
So it probably depends where I sit, right? Because I have teams in New Jersey, New York City, and Stamford, Connecticut, right? So when I'm up to Stamford on Tuesdays, it's very controlled because all of my appointments are there. And I will probably have one-on-ones with my team leads, my direct reports who work there. I'll walk the hall, see how the recruiters are doing. And then usually some of the HR managers I'll have to meet with who are, or maybe having problems. They're going through a downsizing and they want to redeploy some of the people. So it's like talking about internal mobility, things like that. When I'm in New York, it tends to be for presentations. I'm making a pitch about recruiting, I'm selling recruiting, I'm meeting with headhunters who want to do work with us, and I'm attending my professional meetings, right? There's some groups, HR groups that I go to once a month that kind of keep me networked externally. And when I'm in New Jersey, that's my home office, that's where I started. And that's probably where I get most of my
Work done?
Except my boss a year ago asked me to start working from home on Fridays. And I was a little worried, like, why is he suggesting this to me? And he said, Kathy, I want you to be a role model for the others, because some of these other folks who are working in payroll, where I think we have an opportunity to have people work from home, are very resistant to that. So if you would take the lead and begin to manage recruiting in a way that they can work from home and have a more flexible schedule, that would be really important to me. So on Fridays, when I work from home, that's when I get all my work done, because there's no interruptions. Because I'm at the stage where lots of people come to me for coaching. Lots of people come for counseling. Lots of people, UBS is going through a really tough time. We're firing a lot of people, and people are worried, or they're being asked to do jobs that they've never done before. So I find I'm like a career counselor at work for a lot of times. So Friday I do my writing, I do my proposals, I have to pitch for staff all the time to get more staff, and I do most of my work, my thinking work, on Fridays from home.
Okay, mine's going to sound very different. So I have 2 offices as well. I'm mostly in New York, but I also have a office in our New Jersey office, which is, so New York is pretty much all the product development team, HR's there. New Jersey is pretty much finance, store operations, more back of the house kind of things. I try to go there once a week. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. So if I just close my eyes and think about yesterday, I have a board meeting on Monday, so I'm a little freaked out that I'm here today, but I'm glad. So if you think about my responsibilities, so yesterday I spent some time with my direct report, who's a VP of Benefits and Comp, because I have a compensation committee meeting on Monday as part of this board meeting. So I'm sitting with her to go, what I'm doing in that meeting is getting basically all the merit increases, because we do those in the spring, bonuses, stock, all that granted. This is going to happen on Monday. So I got to have everything ticked and tied. So when I go to present it to the board, they give me the thumbs up, which obviously makes people very happy. So I'm checking with her to make sure we're moving on that so I can approve everything tomorrow and we can send it to the board. Then I go down the hall to Bob, who is my head of recruitment and employee relations for corporate. And we are going, I mentioned these talent assessment meetings. He's spearheading those. So I'm making sure we're following up on the notes. We're making sure we have a good track of who's getting promoted, what are we doing developmentally for some of the key leaders we've recognized, and who are some of the folks, quite candidly, that we're probably going to be saying goodbye to, because we have to work on all that. Then I go down the other part of my hall, and now I'm meeting with Tanya, who does employee relations and recruitment for the stores. Tanya usually comes to me with very whacked out type of employee relations issues because she has the stores. So we had an incident where we had a conference last week. Someone, alcohol was served at dinner. You guys will appreciate this. One of them kind of went off the rails, so we had to take care of that. So I'm talking to her about that. Then I went down to Sean, who does learning and development, and he's working on, as you saw in my bio, we are part of the Fortune 100 Best Places to Work. We applied for that since I've been there, so now we have follow-ups from that because it's survey work. And what we do is we take these surveys and we take the information, and that help us determine what initiatives we might put forward for the following year, let's say. So I'm meeting with him because we're going to do focus groups with some folks there. And so it literally, I hate to say this, I would say to my husband, got a busy day today. He's like, if I had $1 for every time you said that. But when I go to New Jersey, that's my quiet day and I get interrupted all day long, just like Kathy, because it's one of those things, my boss told me this a long time ago. When you are good at what you do in HR, it's like you're a doctor and you put the shingle out. It says the doctor is in.
And I was Lucy.
Well, either
Lucy
one.
and Peanuts.
Yes. So we get interrupted a lot, which is fine. So when Kathy's saying her work, and I don't want to speak for you, but they're coming to say, I have an issue with this, or I'm having an issue with my boss. Can you help me? Can I role play this out? So of course, whatever it is you have due, like no one cares I have to get this stupid book done for the comp committee, right? They don't care. So that goes aside, and then you sit and you spend some time coaching and counseling this person. And that's basically what we're put on this earth to do.
And I think I forgot to talk about meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Attending meetings. And attending meetings, okay?
And then there's another meeting.
UBS, the way you communicate is through meetings. And some of the meetings are those brainstorming sessions that Kathy was talking about before, where you want to kind of have a tangible result and an action plan to move out. But a lot of meetings are about people informing you of things that are happening, people who want you to educate them about what's happening in your business, or meetings that just meet, and sometimes not for really good reasons, right? So, and there's a lot of time in your day that you have no control over. You know, my husband has his own business. He's got tons of control over his life. He doesn't understand his wife's corporate life,
which
right?
is why he's sitting here.
You know, which I get pulled in, you know, so I definitely have a calendar every day, but how much of that calendar and how often that calendar changes it's extremely fluid. And my admin is always, you know, Kathy, you're going to meet with this person for 15 minutes because, you know, Bill just called, he needs you to attend this meeting with him to make a presentation on recruiting. So you basically have to be, you know, extremely adaptable and able to kind of pinch hit, have the ability to go in totally, you know, maybe only, you know, a 15th prepared for what's going to happen. You may not even know who you're meeting with until you walk down the hall.
Or the subject matter.
Or the subject
That's
matter.
fabulous, yeah. So I would say the same thing, and I work very closely with our CEO, and everything that I just outlined yesterday, but it was intertwined with him. I have 5 minutes, can you come down and see me? Because we're trying to resolve something. Or I needed his go-ahead on something so I could direct my people for today's activities, so I had to get to him. So it's getting him literally while we're walking, talking in the elevator. I mean, we look like a movie half the time, or a sitcom, probably better served. And okay, I'm good with this, not good with this. So then I can give direction to my team while I'm gone, or while I have to attend something else. So I think one of the things about both of our roles is whereas we do have kind of a rhythm, no 2 days are the same. And to be frank, that is what I absolutely love about it. Absolutely love.
You don't get bored.
And you're tired on Fridays. Very tired. That's when I usually text my husband from, okay, I'm oversharing now, but I take the train home from New York to Connecticut every day, and by Friday night, I'm like, get the cocktail ready. I'm coming. Friday night's cocktail night, that's it. Anything else? I know we're at our time limit.
Perhaps if you don't mind staying back to network with them.
Sure, absolutely.
I'd like to take this moment to thank our guests.
Aww, you're so sweet. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll proudly carry my lunch in my Eastern bag. Because I'm probably the only person that works in Manhattan that brings her lunch. Thank you all very much for your attention. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you seniors. Almost there.